Hello, this is Natalie. I am here given a little bit of a reshoot of our research in the Master Gardener program from this morning, actually. So on March the 6th in the morning, we kicked off our Research in the Master Gardener series, and this is just kind of a presentation that lays the foundation. We'll call it Starting the Conversation. This is actually Rising Sun Redbud, so there's a little analogy in this picture. Our program is founded on research, and how we as volunteers interact with the public, how we understand research, and how we share research is really crucial for our program. And so this is just our step as a Master Gardener work group, as a program, to kind of start the conversation in those areas. And when it comes to research and our Master Gardener program, there are lots of reasons why this is a great and important time to have this conversation. When we think about the world around us, there are a lot of variable views of science. Some people trust it completely, maybe too much. Some people have skepticism at the very nature of research and public institutions. And we interact with all of those areas of clientele. And so having a sense of how to communicate what we do with the public is really important. The other thing, and this is no surprise, right? I'm probably preaching to the choir on this topic, is that we live in an age of information access. We can literally, with a Google search, find anything that we could possibly imagine on our computer screen. And the challenge of that is that in this time of access, we are also overloaded with information. And while that may in some ways seem as if it makes us unimportant, right, or we may be becoming obsolete, I think that that is actually the opposite. I think that there are many other people that would support this. And what we're seeing with the population is that rather than being inundated by information, what they want is someone who can clearly communicate and synthesize that information and give them a succinct and clear answer to some of the questions that they have. Kind of sounds like our program to me. And so I think that really we're becoming more important to our society as clear, honest communicators with integrity. And finally, there is a decline in civil discourse. In many ways, you look around us and it seems like people have forgotten how to talk to each other respectfully. And so in our program, in the way that we deal with public, I think that it is important to raise the bar on what we require of ourselves and how we interact with the public. And so we want to address the respectful nature of the way that our conversations with people should take place, even if we don't agree on all the facts. So as I mentioned, this is really just the beginning of this conversation. We're going to have 4 different Friday Zoom meetings. This is just the foundational one, right? So we're just kind of setting the stage, and then the more topical discussions are going to follow. Next week, Dr. Jennifer Saruta, our apiculturist and extension specialist in that area, is going to be talking about what is up with our bees. Then the next week, Dr. Scott Sinsman, who is actually my department head in plant sciences, but also a longtime weed science researcher, is going to be sharing some about the world of herbicides and how that has changed and what some of the crucial points of information are at this current period of time. And then on the 27th, the last Friday of the month, Carol Reese is going to be discussing some of those issues with natives and non-natives in our residential landscape. I know that these selections are certainly not everything that we talk about, and so we're definitely going to build on these ideas in the future, but this is our first attempt, and we're excited about what's coming this month. So today, it's my job to kind of form the foundation, and we're going to break this discussion into 3 different categories. We're going to kind of start at the bottom and then build up to communicating with our stakeholders and citizens across the state. So first, we're going to talk about key concepts of research, how it's done at land-grant universities like UT and the Institute of Agriculture. Then we're going to build onto that, and we're going to talk about how you can receive research information, what to look for, what are the key hallmarks of high-quality research. And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to talk about communicating research as a volunteer to our communities and the people that we interact with daily as a part of our program. So, land-grant universities, of which UT and the Institute of Agriculture is certainly one. Where does that really come from, and what does that mean? Well, it all started in 1862 with the Morrill Act, and I know that many of you on here may be agents who have worked with master gardeners for a long time, maybe long-time volunteers, but we also have a lot of interns. So I'm going to give a quick overview. That legislation in 1862 essentially granted blocks of land in the western United States to be sold, and the money from those sales would fund education and institutions that would conduct education in agriculture and mechanical sciences. It was a whole different world in 1862, with more than 50% of our population actively engaged in farming and food production. It's much, much different in the landscape now, right? We have currently less than 2% of our working population that are on the farm. And while we still are very dedicated to serve that working population, the mission of land-grant universities, which began as a focus on agricultural and mechanical sciences, has really spread to serve much wider audiences across our state, right? I can think right now for some of my colleagues here at the Institute of Agriculture, we have family and consumer sciences faculty who are working on research that focuses on the opioid epidemic. We have 4-H and youth development faculty who are working on projects that focus more on activity and health and obesity in youth. We have traditional agricultural producers who may be breeding some of the best soybeans in the country right here at UT. So we still meet the needs of farm and rural audiences, but we also meet a lot of needs in more urban areas, for families, for youth, for individuals. And that's how the mission of the land-grant university has kind of changed and evolved over time. So that's a little bit of our mission. That's the big picture. Now we talk a little bit about the methods, right? So we're getting to the money, right? And we talk a lot about the fact that land-grant universities are publicly funded, and that is absolutely true. There are several ongoing items of the budget that provide money for us to operate. I talked about the Morrell Act. The Hatch Act has consistent funding for research. Smith-Lever funds extension, and those components, legislative money from the federal government, are key parts of how we operate. However, they are not solely how we operate, because those hard funds, as we call them, are not enough to conduct all of the research and outreach that we currently do. And so researchers now rely quite a bit on what we call soft funds, right, or grants and fees. And so those become a necessity to carry out the high level of research that we expect and we need from our land-grant universities. So there are some federal sources for those types of funds: the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. Those are certainly good sources that faculty members across our campus take advantage of. However, there's high competition for those grants, and often the percentage of those projects that are funded is actually fairly low. Percentages certainly vary, but it could be 5 to 20% of those grants that are actually funded. And so a majority of the time invested in writing those grants, may not result in money. And so researchers are constantly working to find other sources of support for their important research, whether it be private funding through companies and products testing or evaluation, whether it be independent 501c3s or nonprofits. Gates Foundation would be an example of a program like that. And in extension, we also work a lot off of fee-based money, because while our salaries are covered, we may actually not have any operating expenses, and fee-based programming can be an important way to support our programs. So we have the mission, we have the method, and while we're still talking about land grants, I kind of want to share a few of the key features of research at land grants and just research in general as you think about research-based information that gets communicated and shared with the public. So here at UTIA and many other land grants, the interesting thing about our research is that it covers a really wide range, right? So right here in my building, we may have people who are molecular biologists conducting very basic research, lab scale or benchtop, we might call it. We also have folks like myself whose research is very applied, very much where the rubber hits the road. And that whole range helps us both serve the needs now, but also prepare for the needs of the future. It's important to always keep in mind that part of the rigor of the research system is that it's conducted by experts in the field, right? We can all joke about how long it took us, in my instance, 12 years, right, to get to the point where we were quote unquote trained as a researcher. But it's a key element of the way that our system works, that we have experts in the field who know the nuances of their system, who work with many types of collaborators to conduct this research. Once it's completed, then other experts in the field have the opportunity to comment on it. And you have probably heard the term peer-reviewed, and that comes in lots of different layers in the research and land grant sector. Whether it be as a grad student, you have many faculty members on your committee who comment along your entire course of research, whether it be when you take information and present it at professional conferences. You have a whole room full of your peers who ask sometimes hard and important questions about that work. Every time you publish something in a journal, it gets sent out to people with expertise in that area, potentially all over the world, who can send back feedback and say, you need to change this, you need to think about this, what about this? And it continues to raise the level of quality in our work. Even our extension publications. You may not know this, I hope you do, but if you see an extension publication that says W such and such, that was actually peer-reviewed within extension and faculty members here at the Institute of Agriculture. So we care about the quality of work. We do our best to rigorously peer-review it. And the other important thing that I want to communicate about research and researchers at land-grant universities is that we know and highly value our end user, right? If I'm working in vegetable trials, or if my colleague is working in corn trials, we are also the ones who are often communicating that information to our stakeholders. And so we do our very best that it's the highest quality information that we can possibly give you, because we value your success, we value that accountability, integrity, and trust in our institution. So as we think about this big picture, kind of wrap up a few of these take-home points about research, it's that there's no way around it, right? We can say sometimes that we wish that it wasn't so, but grants and funding are essential for high-level research to continue. But linked with that is the fact that integrity and trust in our system is also crucial. So land-grant universities bring together that expertise and that public trust and accountability, which are crucial for a research foundation. Here's another point that is sometimes fairly clear that maybe we don't always like to admit, but many times science discovers better than it communicates. And so it's our responsibility as researchers, as extension professionals, to continue to get better at the way that we share how research is conducted and what it means to our stakeholders, where our limits are, what the areas that we're still working on and we don't completely understand are. Communication will be critical moving forward. And so as we wrap up this section, I just want to say that here at our university, we're faculty members, we're researchers, or extension professionals who research and communicate for the goal of supporting you in your lawns, in your landscapes, in your farms, and build and sustain a trust that takes us all into the future. So just to kind of show you that we're serious about that, right? Our mission, our value as an institute incorporates all of these ideas that I was just talking about. Our tagline is realize solutions, right? We want what we do to be applicable, to be usable by citizens of the state. And we respect those citizens as we conduct our work, as we communicate our work. We are focused on science-based solutions, diversity in the people who are conducting the research, but also in the people who we're delivering it to. We want to be responsive, we want to be transparent, and we want to be accountable. So if I could communicate one thing about extension, about research, about what we do at the Institute of Agriculture, it's this. We want you to hear, see, understand, and in some cool instances even contribute to our research. And there's lots of ways that we hope you see and understand that fact. With field days, right? If you have the opportunity to visit experiment stations and see who does research and how it's done, you can't necessarily walk on any time and expect a great wagon tour like this, but anytime that we have public into our research stations, we're kind of excited to show off the work that takes place there. We also want you to hear about that research from the people who are doing it. This is Dr. Mark Wyndham, who's one of our pathologists, a great faculty member in entomology and plant pathology department. And this is actually at one of our Master Gardener regional meetings a couple of years ago. So even from this picture looking at the back of folks' heads, I actually know several of people there who have the opportunity to hear about some cutting edge ornamental research that Dr. Wyndham is doing. These are my own plots at the organic farm in Knoxville. And so if you've ever been to those plots, you know that I'm excited to share off some of the vegetable trials that are going on there. In fact, you know, I want to tell you about them. You probably can't stop me, right? And so this see here, understand, let me walk you through and talk about the disease management, fertility, all of those sorts of things. This is how we want for you to engage with our research. And in addition to see, hear, understand, there's even some cool opportunities to contribute, and that looks very different across our Master Gardener programs. Here's an example. These are some Madison County Master Gardeners. You may recognize a few of these people in this picture. And they are getting a plant sale ready because they work in collaborations with the UT Gardens Jackson, which is at our West Tennessee Research and Education Center. And the funds that are derived from this plant sale actually support help for Jason Reeves, the research associate there. So they actually directly support ornamental research that takes place at one of our research and education centers. We also have some shovel ready in the ground opportunities that you can contribute to research. This is installing a new blueberry cultivar trial at the Greenville Research and Education Center. This is a picture from last spring. So I think we've got some faculty members, we've got some county extension agents, and we've got some great master gardeners from the Big Springs all working together in that new plot installation. We'll even use your data, right? So we have some cool opportunities with citizen science and our home garden variety trial where you get to contribute to research that supports gardeners across the state of Tennessee. So that is a little bit about our mission and the methods and the way that we want to engage with stakeholders. As we kind of roll into the next step, we're talking about research and how it is delivered to you as gardeners, right, as consumer horticulturists. So we have a lot of things going for us in this world of horticulture. There's lots of cool aspects of delivering and sharing research designed for the gardener. One of the biggest ones is that we have a large and really interested audience. Literally, a majority of the population engages in horticulture in some way. There are a lot of great means of sharing information, a lot of social media platforms, a lot of personal connections, a lot of print, video, digital methods. We also have the benefit of having an approachable and very applicable topic, right? We are researching and sharing things that absolutely impact people's lives every day, and there are lots of positive ways that horticulture benefits people. However, combined with those assets, there are some challenges. And one of them is that we have a wide waterfront, right? So whether it be entomology, plant pathology, horticulture and plant production, fruits, vegetables, ornamentals, even herbs, trees, right? A huge amount of content area that touches this consumer horticulture crowd. And because we have so many people that have questions, that interact with us kind of as instructors in the extension sector, that's where most of our expertise and our faculty and our agent support rely, right? In the outreach in the education area. So there aren't a ton of researchers who are working to do new and cutting edge types of investigations in consumer horticulture. Because there aren't a lot of people working there, there is currently a rather low volume of research dollars invested in consumer horticulture. That's kind of a two-edged sword, right? So not a lot of people, not a lot of money. And this kind of brings us to the reality of the way that we do consumer horticulture education. We rely upon the high quality consumer focused research that we have. We use this data a lot. And this is a really good example. In the back of this picture, you can see an AAS sign, right? So the All-American Selection. It's a long-running trial system that is dedicated to producing very usable and applicable information for gardeners. We also use a lot of research that takes place for more commercial horticulture, right? My background, as you probably know, is vegetable production. And really my background is small-scale commercial vegetable production, whether it be greenhouses or high tunnels. And so a lot of the work that I accomplished in that area actually has a lot of applicability to gardeners. A lot of those tools could be used in both of those areas, whether it be nutrition. If you ask me whether we have field plot trials that look at how phosphorus and potassium should be optimally applied in a home garden, I'm not going to have a lot of data that I can rely on. However, I can go look at commercial vegetable production research that has done that nutrition work, and we can use that in our garden, which we do. And that's the numbers that you get from the Soil Pest and Plant Center when you send in a soil test. We are also, and this is a nationwide effort, to keep pushing for more funds and investment in consumer horticulture research, because it can benefit so many people across our population. We also need to be honest about the spots where there are needs, right? Where we may literally not have data or information that directly responds to a question that we get. An answer that one of the common questions that we might get would be, do you have data on the efficacy of different organic or low impact pesticides or fungicides, insecticides for the home gardener? In some instances, we may not have a lot of data on that. And so we can share what the label says, right? How they're recommended and are required to be used, but we may not necessarily have all of the information in some areas that people would want. So when we think about the data that we have access to, what we see reported, it kind of falls in two general categories. We have what we call qualitative, which would be more of a psychology and a social science type of data, where maybe focus groups, a lot of notes are taken and that data is coded, right? We don't see a lot of that in horticulture. We're going to primarily be dealing with a range of what we would call quantitative data, right? And it may be derived from a lab, but most of what we'll see will come either from the field, like we're looking at right here, or even from people, right? Surveys are a great way that we derive quantitative data. And what are some of the important things that we're looking for in that research? We're looking for research that is grounded in the scientific method, right? We have a hypothesis, and then we design a way to test that hypothesis. We'll use controls. This is very easily described when I talk about some of my field trials for grafted tomatoes in the next slide set, right? If I'm going to really be able to see if grafted tomatoes can be an asset in our garden, then I need to compare them against ungrafted controls. We want to focus on eliminating variables that we're not testing, so we don't have things influencing our research that we didn't anticipate. We want to replicate. We want to replicate in the field to make sure that it's not just an issue with the soil or aspect that's influencing our study. We want to take detailed, consistent data that we can explain exactly how we got it, and we want to do appropriate statistics. So I'm just going to share a few examples in real life for data that you can access. So these are some of description of some of my own grafted tomato trials. And what was my hypothesis that I was testing? If these new grafting techniques could be useful to gardeners, right? So I used grafted plants, but also ungrafted controls, grown in the same space, fertilized, watered, picked at the same time, grafted and ungrafted plants of the same cultivar. And I replicated those plots in the field, right? I had 4 different replications all in one field to make sure that it wasn't corner of the plot or, variable irrigation or anything like that. And I also did it across multiple years, 3 years, as a matter of fact. I was pretty picky about the data that I took. I sorted usable and unusable fruit. We took fruit counts, every single one of those 12 or 14 harvests that we did every year. And then we used statistics to analyze that data to make sure that if we said that it was different, then there really was a good basis for that. And here's an example of what those data look like. So these are numbers from trials in 2017 and in 2018. And you can see that I have big beef, both grafted on a rootstock called Emperador, but also big beef on its own roots, right? Ungrafted. So this is our control. And in 2017, all of those yield was collected across the entire season. And statistically speaking, the grafted big beef did yield more than the ungrafted. And so we run statistics, we report on how that was calculated. And if there is a statistical difference, then that is represented by having different letters beside those numbers. And so what are we really doing? We're really looking at the variability in the yields from those different replicated plots. And we're trying to make sure that the difference in grafted and ungrafted rises above the noise of that variability. Because if the variability is very, very high, then we don't have confidence that that there's truly a difference between grafted and ungrafted. 2018, we did the same trial also for replications, and the yields were much closer together, and there was no statistically significant difference. So not really surprisingly, we can see that the impact of grafting can actually vary by season, right? It can also vary based on whether we're talking about a very productive F1 hybrid or whether we're talking about an heirloom. So in the year where big beef, we didn't really see significant differences. We saw that grafting could help Cherokee Purple, which was an heirloom tomato. So, so these are just examples of the way that we use statistics. We even do statistics on the numbers that come into you from you, right? So this is how our home garden variety trial is reported. So these cucumbers are from 16 different sites across Tennessee. And all of the gardeners sent in numerical ratings, right? And we can actually do statistics on those. So individual gardeners are kind of like those plots that were all across the field in the previous grafting example. And there was a statistically significant difference in the overall rating between those cucumbers, between their health and between their yield. However, there were some areas where that difference was either flat or whether it wasn't significantly different. We can also find examples of data. These are flower trial ratings that you can also access right on the UT Gardens Jackson site. And these are numerical ratings for different ornamentals in the trial beds in Jackson. And you can see that these are what we would call single replication, right? When there's only one plot and only one rating, we can't really do statistics on it because there's only one number and we have no sense of the variability. However, we can get good information from these for ourselves as gardeners. And oftentimes the way that these trial data are really used is these would be contributed to seed trialer like All American Selections, and they would use this site and sites from all over the country, and those would be the replications, and that could enable statistics to be used. So that's kind of an example of what some of those plot trial data would look like. We can even do statistics and data on ourselves as volunteers. This is an example of research that was conducted by one of my friends and colleagues down at the University of Georgia. She's the state coordinator of the Master Gardener program down there. And this was actually part of her doctoral dissertation. And so this was a very large data set derived from nearly 7,500 Extension Master Gardeners across the country filling out a survey. In fact, there may be some of you who filled out this survey. And she derived a huge amount of quantitative data, right? Numerical ratings and scales from this survey, and did some very specific statistics on it. And they're reported in tables that look like this, right? So that we can compare the age of Master Gardeners across the country, the years of their service for the people who turned in these trials. And then, of course, this is survey data, so some of the statistical methods are different, but once again, we're able to statistically describe whether or not these things are different. So here's a fun example that I pulled out just to, kind of brag on ourselves a little bit. So of all the volunteers that turned in this survey across the country, they reported how many hours they had spent in service in the Master Gardener program in the year 2015. And so we can ask ourselves the question, well, do Master Gardener volunteers in the South Central region, which is where we are in Tennessee, do they actually invest more time in service than Master Gardeners in the Northeast? And right there we have Northeast and North Central, and we look at the numbers that denote the statistics of this analysis, and we can see that actually those are statistically different. So, we can brag on ourselves. According to the participants in this study, Master Gardeners in Tennessee actually donate more hours than in other places of the country. So that's kind of a sense of what the numbers look like. And if you're sitting there listening and you're like, wow, that's interesting, but it's kind of daunting. How do I assess all of that information? Well, what I want to pass on to you, an important note as we finish up this section, is thinking about the fact that you are not responsible for synthesizing all that data, right? It's daunting. There's more and more and more of it every day. And so faculty members, extension specialists, it is all kind of our role to serve as synthesizers of that data. And that's how and why extension publications are developed, to kind of take this big mountain of research and deliver it in a way that's usable and applicable for public audiences. We also want to make sure that it's applicable for our regions and for our people, right? So there can be some great things going on in Oregon, California, but geographically it might not be great for the part of the country that we live. So we talked about research in terms of our institution, our integrity, our mission. We talked about research and what it looks like and how you can kind of understand and know if it's high quality or not. The third thing that I want to visit a little bit in just a few minutes that we have remaining is, how do we go about having conversations about research-based topics or even hot button issues that we may not necessarily agree with people on. And so we're going to kind of lay it out in 3 steps: the mindset, the methods, and the medium. So we personally always take our own lens, right, our own way of seeing a situation with us into any conversation. We focus and we strive for unbiased research, right? But unbiased people really don't happen, right? There isn't such a thing. And so it's up to us to make sure that we understand our own perspectives so that we can make sure that those aren't overly influential in the way that we operate. So as we kind of keep in mind going into those conversations, we don't assume any sinister motives, right? When people come to us with questions or things they disagree about, we assume that they're open-minded, and until proven differently, we try to lay out the facts in a way that doesn't prejudice us in any way. This is kind of a hot pepper joke, right? So this is a picture of roulette, which is a heatless habanero, right? It looks mean, but it actually has no sinister motives. We also want to know where our nerves are, right? All of us bring our own personal background and ideas to a situation, and there may be things that kind of set us off more than others, right? So we need to know where our sensitive areas are so that we can control that and not let that spill over into any other conversations. We also want to resist othering, right? We want to focus on the similarities, look for the common ground. Even if, say, we disagree about some of the materials that we might use, whether it be organic or whether it be conventional gardening. We all strive to support soil quality, right, and environmental health. And so there are more things that we agree on than we disagree on. We never start sentences with "you people," right? So that's the mindset. As we move into the method, there are a few key things to keep in mind. We don't make it personal, right? How can we absolutely sink our ship immediately? By attacking character, right? By assuming that they're out to get us, so that they're deficient in some way. And we never attack their competency. There may be times when we truly think that they bring a severe lack of education or information to a topic, but nothing will kill a conversation faster than condescension. So we never attack their competency. We want to listen and ask questions first. We don't really know the mindset that people bring to an argument or a discussion, and it may not be an argument at all. The best thing we can do is get a sense of where they're coming from. Sometimes people are just confused or they don't have the correct information, and we can quickly assist them. Some people just like to talk everything through, and even if they actually don't disagree with us on anything, they just want to hear different sides of the story. Of course, there are also some that truly like to argue for entertainment, and we'll quickly pick those out and try not to spend too much time getting lost in those sorts of discussions. So this is my volleyball analogy. When we go into these discussions, we want to enter them with a mindset not of spiking the ball, right? Not of slamming people, showing them exactly where they're wrong. We just want to continue to ask questions, right? We want to set, not spike. We want to replace judgment with curiosity, right? Be generous in our listening. Try to get a sense of where they're personally coming from on this topic. And if we don't have a little bit of time to invest or energy for this conversation, we probably shouldn't start it. But we also want to keep in mind not to let it be a bottomless pit, right? You can't invest too much energy into any one conversation. It probably won't help either party. We want to be able to restate their position without prejudice, right? So without condescension or tone, right? We're going to be able to say in an unbiased way. So what I'm hearing you say is that you're concerned about X. Make sure that they agree with our restatement of that position. And sometimes there may actually be some straightforward ways that they're just confused or don't understand the issue, and we can straighten them out. You may know me well enough to know that I'm kind of a big picture. I want to understand the whole context. And so if I have a conversation with somebody and they have questions or express skepticism about something like GMO seeds, I need to just continue to ask questions, right? Because rather than launching into a whole big picture idea of how this technology is used, it's probably more useful to me to find out what they're really concerned about. And sometimes people are simply concerned that they won't recognize genetically modified seeds. And we can clearly say, you know what, it's not really a problem for you. You're not going to accidentally buy GMO vegetable seeds for your garden. For one thing, we don't have any GMO tomatoes on the market. This is an old picture from 1994. That was the flavor saver tomato, no longer on the market. There's only a couple that are out there, sweet corn and some summer squash, but those are commercial varieties. Lots of times you'll even have to sign, special technology transfer agreements. So it's not something that you need to worry about accidentally stumbling onto. Or sometimes people won't understand some of kind of the marketing and the difference between marketing and production. Organic would be an example here, where some people have the connotation that organic kind of means no management, right? No sprays that were used in the growth of that crop. That's often not true. What organic really means is that there's a different grouping, right? It's a different subset of materials that might be used to grow that crop. We want to be careful of bias assimilation, right? We can, we invested in making sure that we could restate their position. We can kind of see now if they can restate ours. But we also have to keep in mind, and people are much more likely to readily accept information that already agrees with what they thought coming in, right? So this can be a process. And this may be one of the most important things to keep in mind when we have conversations about some of these hot topics with people that don't necessarily always agree with everything that we're saying. And that is, it's more important to show respect for the person than it is to try to convince them of anything, right? We want to be clear. We want to be respectful. We want to be honest. We want to have integrity. We don't need to focus on convincing them because, truthfully, people don't change their opinions all that often, but they can change their opinions about us, right? Or about the other side. We want to leave the conversation open to revisit. There's lots of times that this may be a process for people, and we want to be open and honest about some of the areas that are gray, right? A lot of these are areas of ongoing research. We're still learning about a lot of them. We want to end the conversation respectfully and leave on good terms. So we talked about the mindset. We talked about the methods. The last thing is, of course, the medium. I actually made up this quote, right? I shared an opinion on Facebook. Someone called me an ignorant idiot. Thankfully, that helped me see the error of my thinking. Not only did I never say that, but no one ever said that, right? Because interacting in a negative way on a social media never really helped anyone change their mind about anything. And so it's important for us to find the right time, the right spot, the right way to share information with people. Facebook can deliver information, right? But having arguments on Facebook never really helps. Same thing with email, right? People put things in email that they would never say to your face. And that makes it a poor medium if we're not completely on the same page. We want to pick up the phone, or we want to go eyeball to eyeball, right? So talking in person is always going to be the best. And there are going to be some mitigating factors, right? We need to know ourselves, how we operate in specific situations, whether we need to tone it up or whether we need to tone it down. And don't forget that our personal backgrounds, our education, our experience, our geography, our age, even the way men and women have different conversations do come into play. So to kind of help guide us through some of these things, we actually have some new information that just got put into our volunteer handbook, which is W099, that has a lot of guidelines for the Master Gardener program. And it has some guiding principles for how we share information with citizens and stakeholders. And so the big three are: focus on our topic, right? Our consumer horticulture topic and content. Rely upon high quality resources, and focus on respectfully educating, not convincing or persuading. If you want to look this up, it's on page 20. So to bring this conversation to a close, I just want to share a couple of ideas, right? So hills that we are not willing to die on, right? Essentially what I'm saying is battles that just aren't worth fighting. And one of them is absolutely at all costs avoiding difficult discussions. Sometimes we need to lean in, right? Sometimes we need to have that discussion, but we want to make sure we can do it respectfully, calmly, kindly. But another thing that we want to trap, right, a sand trap, if you will, is spending all of our time discussing only controversial issues to try and convince the world, when there are lots and lots of things that we can agree on and valuable information that we could be sharing, instead of just talking about those handful of controversial topics. The other important thing that I want to say when it comes to master gardeners, volunteers, and how you share information is that we understand that there are going to be some things that you may not completely agree with, with extension publications and those types of things. Or there may be, say, materials in extension publication that you don't use in your personal garden. That's okay, right? We do not require forced professions, right? But what we do is we rely on your professionalism, your respect for our program and for our institution. But if your personal opinions differ, you don't necessarily promulgate those, from a soapbox, right? So, so it's really about professionalism, not about making sure that everybody toes the company line, so to speak. But things that we are absolutely going to fight for, right? So this is a Spartan on a hill, right? Battles that we're willing to engage in. We will fight to respect each other, right? For having civil discourse is a very high priority for our program. We will fight for the recognition that science is foundational in our Extension Master Gardener program. Not anecdote, not what I did in my own production, but research-based information and science. And we will defend our institutional integrity and credibility. And so those are some of the key ideas that I kind of wanted to get across as we start this discussion and this ongoing conversation about master gardeners, research, and how we address some of these more challenging topics. Thanks so much for joining in, and I look forward to having more conversations with y'all in the future. Bye.